the Supreme Court cleared the way for the Trump administration to wipe out Steve Bannon's contempt of Congress conviction. At the Department of Justice's request, the court erased lower court rulings and sent the case back to district court. The department has asked that court to dismiss the case. Bannon, a former Trump aide and now a MAGA podcast host, was convicted in 2022 for defying a House subpoena tied to the January 6, 2021 Capitol attack. Bannon served a 4-month prison sentence after the Supreme Court in 2024 denied his request to stay free during appeal. After Donald Trump became president, the Department of Justice stopped defending the conviction.
Hey folks, welcome back to another John podcast episode. Okay, so here's what just happened. Steve Bannon defied a congressional subpoena over January 6th, got convicted of contempt of Congress, and is now watching the entire case vanish, courtesy of Trump's Justice Department handing him what amounts to a get-out-of-jail-free card. He told Congress to go pound sand, faced 0 real consequences, and walked away clean. That tells you everything you need to know about where accountability actually stands right now. There was a legal claim he made to justify this. He said executive privilege. He claimed that Trump told him not to cooperate and that executive privilege protected him from having to talk to Congress. Executive privilege is a real legal doctrine. It is actually rooted in constitutional principles. It is supposed to protect confidential conversations between the president and his advisors. The whole idea is that presidents need to be able to have private conversations without worrying that everything they say is going to get subpoenaed and put on trial. That is a real legal principle that matters. But here is the thing: executive privilege does not cover everything.
Okay. This is here. Trump Constitution license. Trump Constitution shoot and emerge from the limits of power to be blunt. That's the lesson here. The existential threat President Trump's administration is not in front of the vote. What President Trump is doing is constitutional. The appellate courts say that. The Supreme Court will say that. The existential threat to President Trump's administration, and I mean Doge, Elon Musk, Secretary of Treasury Bannon, Russ Vought, Stephen Miller, all of his people. The existential threat is right here in this city. It is the queen of lawfare. It's Letitia James. Right now, Soros has a DA that's running unopposed. He can call a grand jury anytime. He can set up criminal charges for the most bogus efforts. Letitia James runs this deal. She's got a pliant media right here, pliant left-wing media. She's got a jury pool of only left-wing radicals in the Upper West Side of this city. And she's got the judges, she's got all of it. And I'm calling on right now the Attorney General Pam Bondi to begin an immediate criminal investigation to Letitia James.
It is not a magic shield. There are limits to it. There are rules about when it applies and when it does not. A lot of legal experts looked at what Bannon was claiming and said that this was weak, that this was not a legitimate use of executive privilege, that this was him just trying to dodge. So he got hit with criminal contempt charges. A jury went through the trial and said guilty. He went to prison for 4 months. That was under the previous administration, an administration that was not friendly to Trump. Bannon served his time. He did the 4 months. The conviction was on the books. Justice was supposed to be served. Flash forward to now. Trump is back in office. Trump's Justice Department is running the show. Trump's people are making decisions about who gets prosecuted and who does not. And suddenly, the Supreme Court issues a ruling that clears the path for Trump's DOJ to just drop the whole thing. Drop it completely. The contempt conviction gone, disappeared. The argument from Trump's lawyers was that dismissal is in the interest of justice. In the interest of justice. You hear that phrase, and you have got to wonder whose justice we are actually talking about here, because it sure looks like Bannon's justice. It sure looks like Trump insider justice. It looks like loyalty getting rewarded by the system. This is the part that really gets people fired up. Bannon already served his time. He went to prison. He paid the price that the court said he owed. But there was this appeal thing hanging over him, some legal technical issue about whether the whole conviction was solid. The Supreme Court basically ruled in a way that opened a door, and Trump's team walked right through it. They said that they were not going to pursue this case anymore, that they were dropping it as a matter of justice. And just like that, the whole thing evaporates. The conviction that said he defied Congress, that was supposed to mean something permanent and serious, it does not matter anymore because the Trump administration's Justice Department just decided it is not worth their time and effort. That is actually pretty stunning when you think about it. Here is where it gets really interesting and honestly kind of disturbing. This is not happening in a vacuum. This is one move in a much bigger picture. This is part of a pattern. Since Trump came back into office, his Justice Department has been quietly reshaping how it handles cases involving Trump allies and Trump supporters. Cases that used to seem locked in, cases where the convictions looked absolutely permanent, cases where people thought that was settled. Now there is suddenly this flexibility. There is this opening. There is this opportunity to make problems go away. Let us call it what it is, because that is what people are doing. It is favoritism toward the people around Trump. It is the system bending to protect insiders. Critics are absolutely losing their minds over this. They are saying the Supreme Court just enabled a situation where Trump can basically shield his supporters from any real accountability for what happened on January 6th. That day is not just some historical event that people study in textbooks anymore. It is becoming a political tool. It is becoming something that gets weaponized depending on which side of the political spectrum you are on. The timing is wild too. We are not that far away from the upcoming midterm elections. Democrats need these elections. They desperately need to hold their Senate seats. They need to take back seats they lost. They need momentum. And they have got this Supreme Court ruling, this Justice Department move, this signal that Trump is using government power to protect his allies and insiders. That is explosive political material. That is the kind of thing that can actually move voters and energize people. Republicans, meanwhile, a lot of them are probably cheering behind the scenes because this signals that things are going to be different now, that loyalty gets rewarded, that Trump looks out for his people, that if you stuck with him through thick and thin, through all the controversies and chaos, you get taken care of. Let us be real about what this moment represents. It is not just about Bannon. It is about the signal it sends. It is about what happens when the president can reach into the Justice Department and make cases against his allies disappear. It is about justice and favoritism becoming indistinguishable. It is about power shaping the system to its own advantage. This is happening while Trump is still dealing with his own legal problems and controversies from January 6th. His Justice Department quietly dispatching a case against one of his closest advisors. That is a message. Trump is saying that he takes care of people who are loyal to him. Whether you think that is good or bad, you cannot pretend it does not matter. This is different. This is significant. Let me dig into why so many people do not fully get why this moment is such a big deal. If you are not paying attention to both the legal and political stuff and how they connect, it is easy to miss why this Bannon thing is massive. This changes things. This matters. Let me start with January 6th. I am not going to spend a long time relitigating what happened that day, because we all know a mob stormed the Capitol. People got hurt, Congress got evacuated. It was chaotic, dangerous, and unprecedented. The debate is not about whether it happened. It is about what it means, who was responsible, and what should happen to people involved. The House Select Committee was created specifically to investigate this whole thing. The committee had real power. They could subpoena people. They could demand documents. They could hold people in contempt if they did not comply. These were not just suggestions or requests. These were legal powers, backed by the force of law. Steve Bannon got hit with a subpoena. The committee wanted him to talk about what he knew. The committee wanted details. They wanted to understand the planning, the coordination, the strategy. They wanted to hear from someone on the inside how this whole thing actually came together. That is what investigations do. That is how Congress gets information. Bannon said no. He had a lawyer, a smart guy, an expensive lawyer, and the lawyer gave him legal advice. The advice was basically that he did not have to cooperate because of executive privilege. That is Bannon's story. That is what his legal team argued. They said Trump had told him not to cooperate and that executive privilege protected him from having to turn over documents or testify. Executive privilege is a real legal doctrine. It is based on the idea that presidents need to have confidential conversations with their advisors. If every single word a president says to his advisors gets subpoenaed and put on trial, then presidents cannot speak freely. Presidents might not get honest advice. Advisors might not tell the president what they really think. So executive privilege exists to protect those conversations. That is the theory behind it. That is why it exists. The problem with Bannon's case is significant. Executive privilege is not unlimited. It is not a magic shield that covers everything a president says or every conversation a president has. There are situations where it does not apply. There are limits to it. There are rules. In Bannon's case, a lot of legal experts looked at it carefully and said that this claim was weak, that this was him trying to dodge, that this was not legitimate. He claimed Trump had invoked executive privilege, but Trump did not actually formally invoke it through the proper legal channels. Trump did not file the right documents. Trump did not go to court. Trump just allegedly told Bannon not to cooperate. That is different. That is not the same thing. Courts started ruling against Bannon. One court after another said that he did not get to hide behind executive privilege here, that he had to testify, that he had to provide the documents. The legal noose was tightening. The path was clearing. It was looking like Bannon would lose. But Bannon refused to comply anyway. He just did not show up to testify. He did not provide anything. He did not acknowledge the orders. He just said no. That is when the contempt charges came down. Contempt of Congress is a big deal. It is not like getting a parking ticket or a minor fine. This is serious. It basically means you are telling Congress that you are not going to follow their lawful order, and there is nothing they can do about it. It is about respect for the institution. It is about whether Congress can actually exercise its constitutional power to investigate things. That is fundamental to how democracy actually works. Congress has to be able to compel testimony and documents. Without that power, Congress cannot do investigations. Without investigations, there is no accountability. Bannon got charged. He went to trial. A jury listened to the evidence and said that he did this, that he defied Congress, that he violated the law. Guilty. He got convicted. He got sentenced to 4 months in prison. This was under the previous administration. The previous administration's Justice Department prosecuted it. Courts upheld the conviction. Everything seemed settled. Locked in, final. This was justice working. This was the system functioning. Then Trump comes back into office, and suddenly there is this appeal floating around in the Supreme Court. The appeal is not about whether Bannon defied Congress. That is settled. That is not in question. The appeal is about some specific legal question regarding how contempt charges should be handled. It is technical. It is about the legal framework. It is about standards of proof. It is about procedure. These are not the sexy questions, but in law, procedure is everything. Procedure is how you win cases. Procedure is how systems actually work. The Supreme Court issues a ruling, and the ruling, while it does not directly overturn Bannon's conviction, it clears the path for it to be dismissed. It gives Trump's Justice Department the legal opening they need. It is like someone just opened a door and said that there is a window here, that they can walk through this if they want to. Trump's DOJ does not hesitate. They immediately walk through that door. No waiting, no hesitation. They file a motion saying that they are going to move to dismiss this case, that it is in the interest of justice. In the interest of justice is one of those legal phrases that sounds neutral, but actually is not. It is a phrase that can mean basically anything depending on who is using it and what they want to accomplish. The prosecution can argue that pursuing a case is in the interest of justice. The defense can argue that dismissing a case is in the interest of justice. It is flexible. It is open to interpretation. It is malleable. And right now, it is being used to get rid of a case against Trump's close ally and advisor. Here is what really gets people fired up about this whole situation. This is not isolated. This is part of a pattern. This is a trend. This is a direction. Since Trump came back, his Justice Department has been quietly reshaping cases involving Trump supporters and Trump allies. Not all at once, not super dramatically, not on television, but gradually, methodically, cases that seem locked in are getting adjusted. They are getting dismissed. They are getting deprioritized. New prosecutors are being brought in. Old prosecutors are being pushed out. The message is clear to anyone paying attention. If you are in Trump's circle, if you stood by him, if you were loyal, you get a different kind of justice than everyone else. You get special treatment. When you step back and look at the big picture, the full scope of what is happening, you are seeing something that a lot of Democrats are calling corruption. Straight up corruption. They are saying Trump is using the Justice Department as a tool to protect his people. They are saying Trump is using it to rewrite the narrative around January 6th. That is a fair point. When the president's DOJ can just decide to drop a conviction against one of the president's closest allies, what does that say about equal justice under law? What does it say about the idea that nobody is above the law? What does it say about the rule of law? These are serious questions about how the system works. Republicans have a different take on this whole situation. They have a different narrative. They will tell you that this is actually justice being corrected. They will say Bannon's prosecution was politically motivated. They will say the previous administration's DOJ went after Trump supporters unfairly and excessively. They will say Trump's DOJ is actually fixing the system. That narrative has real traction with Trump's base. That is the story they want to believe. That is the way they have learned to interpret these events. They have been told for years that the system is weaponized against them and their guy. So when Trump's DOJ dismisses a case against a Trump ally, they do not see corruption. They see justice. They see the system being corrected. But what it boils down to, what really matters here, is this fundamental question. When a president can reach into his own Justice Department and make criminals go away if they are his allies, when legal cases against his supporters can just evaporate, when convictions can be erased like they never happened, then you have to ask yourself some hard questions about what justice actually looks like in this country. You have to ask whether the system is actually neutral or whether it bends to power. You have to ask whether the rule of law means anything when power is the real ruler. These are big questions about the foundation of the system. The thing about Bannon specifically that is worth noting is that he did not get a pardon or anything obvious like that. Trump did not go on television and say he was giving Bannon a presidential pardon. That would be obvious. That would be dramatic. Everyone would see it coming. No, this was subtle. It was technical. It was done through the courts and the Justice Department in ways that were plausible and legal sounding. That actually might be worse than just a pardon would be because it is harder to push back against. It is harder to say this is obviously wrong and corrupt when it is wrapped in legal language, in Supreme Court rulings, and official DOJ briefs. It looks legitimate. It looks like justice, even though everyone can see what is actually happening underneath the legal language. Let me break this down into what actually matters. This story has a lot of moving parts. If you are trying to understand what the actual impact is, what the real consequences are, you need to see it clearly. Point one is simple and direct. The conviction is basically gone. Bannon already served his time, but the conviction was still there on the books. It still meant something legally. It still had weight. It still mattered. It still said this guy defied Congress. Now with Trump's DOJ moving to dismiss, that whole conviction is going to get erased. It will not disappear from history. Obviously, people remember it happened. Historians will write about it. But legally, officially in the system, it is like it never existed. That is actually a huge deal because it changes how people can cite the case, how it affects Bannon's future record, how it impacts the historical record of what happened around January 6th. It changes the legacy of accountability for that entire day. It sends a message that the system is flexible for the right people. This is Trump telling everyone who was there for him, who fought for him, who did not cooperate with the investigations into January 6th, that he has got their backs. You are not going to face permanent legal consequences if you stick with him. If you are loyal, if you do not flip, if you do not cooperate with prosecutors, that is a message that resonates loud and clear. That matters to people in his orbit. That matters to people who might be facing their own legal problems right now. Some of those people might be thinking that maybe they can hang tough, that maybe if they stay quiet and loyal, maybe the system will take care of them too. It says loyalty gets rewarded. That is a powerful message. That is the kind of message that shapes behavior and changes how people act. The January 6th narrative is shifting. It is changing right before our eyes. For years, the narrative was about accountability. The narrative was about the rule of law and consequences for storming the Capitol. The narrative was about democracy being threatened and the system defending itself. But now it is becoming about a witch hunt. Now it is becoming about a weaponized Justice Department being corrected. Now it is becoming about Trump's story. It is becoming about the idea that Trump has been unfairly targeted. Trump's narrative is winning because his Justice Department is literally embodying that narrative. They are proving the story Trump wants to tell. They are showing that they can reshape cases, dismiss convictions, make problems go away. That is proof in Trump supporters' minds that he has been persecuted and now things are being corrected. That is a powerful political narrative. Point 4 is about what this does to the average voter. This is probably going to swing public opinion. Democrats are looking at this and seeing corruption, abuse of power, and authoritarian behavior. Republicans are seeing justice being restored and the system being fixed. Independent voters and people in the middle are probably just confused and cynical about the whole thing. But that confusion and cynicism actually serves Trump's interest. When people stop believing the system works fairly, when they think everything is political, when they think the whole thing is rigged anyway, then Trump's argument that he has been treated unfairly becomes more believable. It becomes understandable. It makes sense in a rigged system. Why does this matter right now? The upcoming midterm elections are huge. Democrats need to hold the Senate. They need to do damage control in the House. They need something that actually moves voters. They need to energize their base and motivate people to get to the polls. They have got this Supreme Court ruling, this Justice Department move, this signal that Trump is using the system to protect his allies. That is explosive stuff. That is the kind of thing that can motivate voters and make them say that they need to do something about this. But here is the thing. This whole situation is also a reminder of something way bigger than just this one case. It is a reminder that the institutions we think protect us, the institutions we think stand between us and abuse of power, they are only as strong as the people in charge of them. The Justice Department is not some independent force for justice. It is not some robot that just follows rules. It is run by people, people who have political loyalties, people who have incentives, people who can be told to do things, people who want to please their boss. When Trump gets control of the Justice Department, he can reshape it, he can reorient it, he can use it to take care of his people. In some ways, that is just how power works in real life. Presidents have always had the ability to direct the DOJ. Presidents have always had prosecutorial discretion, but the unspoken rule used to be that you did not do it blatantly for obviously partisan reasons. You did not do it to help your personal allies escape legal consequences for their actions. You maintained at least the appearance of independence. You tried to keep it quiet. You acted like the Justice Department was something other than the president's personal law firm. Now that appearance is gone. Trump is not pretending. His DOJ is doing what he wants. The Supreme Court is enabling it because the Supreme Court has its own conservative majority that is generally aligned with Trump's priorities. You have got alignment at every level. The president, the Justice Department, and the Supreme Court all working together to dismiss a case against a Trump ally. You have got the whole system pointing in the same direction. That is consolidation of power. That is the system showing you what it looks like. Here is the bottom line. Steve Bannon defied Congress. He was convicted. He served time. The conviction was supposed to mean something permanent. It was supposed to say that he defied Congress, that he violated the law. But because he was Trump's guy and he was loyal, now that conviction is disappearing. That is the system as it actually exists right now. That is accountability. When the president decides who gets held accountable. That is what justice looks like when it is a partisan tool. It changes everything about how we think about January 6th, the Trump presidency, and whether the rule of law means anything. The upcoming midterms are going to be shaped by this. Democrats will say Trump weaponized the Justice Department. Republicans will say the system is being corrected. Voters will decide which story they believe. Bannon's disappearing conviction will be the proof point both sides point to. Pay attention to this. This is the system showing what it looks like when power is consolidated.